who we have before us today is Spencer Doren. And for those of you who don't know who Spencer Doren is, Spencer's going to tell us who he is.
Well, I'm Spencer. I'm a gizmologist, I guess, living out in Seattle. I build products for bass, just trying to make bass players sound better.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, take us a little bit into that. What does that mean?
Well, you know, I am a bass player first and foremost. I still think that's sort of what I do best. I started developing effects and preamps and all of this kind of stuff just out of gigging. I was gigging with gear that I didn't necessarily love. I had ideas for new sounds that I couldn't quite get out of existing gear. So I just started messing around with stuff. And that eventually led into starting a company, because I figured other people would like my ideas if I liked them. So the rest is sort of history. Now I build gear, people buy it, hopefully they like it, and then I get to collaborate with people like Dave, who are also making great products.
Now what's this gear company?
So I've got a couple. The original company is 3 Leaf Audio. I started that when I was in high school. It was sort of a hobby when I started. It was just to make something that I liked and that I would be proud to use.
Right.
Just something with my name on it, because I thought that would be cool. And people got wind of it. People started hearing them locally. They liked them. They asked me if I could build them one. I started building, 5 at a time, 10 at a time, 20 at a time.
Right.
And then eventually it became a thing where I was starting to contract out some of the assembly to people to do soldering and all this, because I couldn't handle it myself. I found a place that would drill my enclosures for me. I found a paint shop. And once I sort of got into the swing of things with production, I thought this could be a real business. Set up a website, started advertising, on forums and stuff. Hey, I make gear that you might like. I like it, so why wouldn't you?
Right. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, and it was cool. It originally started as just a way to sort of make something that was a little different than what I had been using, a little more tailored to me, and things started to evolve, and eventually it sort of takes on a life of its own, and it's so different from what you were originally trying to do that it's sort of a unique thing that is just more sort of my sound than anything else. And then I started Pike Amplification as a way to sort of get back into strictly the bass market, because 3 Leaf Audio was always a company that was more, it sounds good on bass, guitar, keyboards, whatever,
right.
But I wanted to try something where I marketed products strictly to bass players, because that's what I am and that's
right.
what I know the best.
More for focus.
And also more utilitarian, because some of the 3 Leaf Audio pedals, I love them, but it's goofier sort of sounds that you might kick on for one song, but not use for some other songs. And this is more like the Pike products, like the Shapeshifter preamp. That's something that's going to be in your bass and with you always, and always sort of helping you out,
right,
getting the tone you want.
Right, now you're talking about a bass guitar preamp.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack a little bit and just discuss how this preamp came about.
Yeah. So I've been using active basses since I started playing bass, so 12 years now, 13 years.
He's a child.
Yeah. So I had started using preamps when I started playing bass, and I never really thought much about them, and a lot of times I would just leave them off because I liked the sound of the natural tone of the instrument
right.
better. And then I started getting into some higher end instruments where the preamp maybe was doing things that I liked, but I always had ideas where what if this was a little different, or I would like the bass frequency of the preamp, but I wouldn't like the treble. And then
right.
on another preamp, I would like their treble, but I wouldn't like their mid-range, something like that. And there was nothing that really had every frequency that I wanted in my instrument.
Right.
And so I had always kicked around the idea of building a preamp, and one of the first products I actually built was an onboard preamp, but I never sold it. It was just something I built for myself. I put it in one of my instruments, but I never even really told anyone about it. And it sounded all right, but I knew I could do better. And then I had this idea for doing a removable preamp, something that was on a harness that you could disconnect and make a whole line of preamps that would all sound different, but were swappable sort of on the fly. And I figured somebody must have done this by now. Like it was such an obvious idea to me, I figured this has to be obvious to other people.
Right.
And I looked around and nobody had done it. It had never been done. And once I started diving into the design of it, I realized why it had never been done is because it's a lot harder than it seems.
You're right.
Just to get the form factor right, to get the circuit to sound good is one thing, but then there's to make it into a product, getting the right type of connector for the harness, figuring out a harness that's going to make sense for people to install, and click in and be secure and have good sound quality. All of this was issues that had to be overcome. So it was, I think, 4 years in the making. And it was 2 years of design before I ever even sent a prototype to Dave. And I thought it was great. I was so excited to send it to him. And then he got it and he goes, it's okay. I think you can do better. And I thought, okay, well, I'll try to change some stuff up. And then it was 9 or 10 prototypes later, and finally we sort of hit perfection. So it was quite the arduous process, but I think it worked out.
I think so too, but judging by the last version that I heard, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, for people hearing about Pike Amplification for the first time, this is a removable preamp.
Yes.
And how long does it take you to switch this preamp out?
Seconds. The great thing is, I'm a tinkerer, so I like to try different products. I like to, optimize everything I have. So, if you want a bass to be the best it can possibly be, you might want to try a few different preamps. The problem with that is, if you have to desolder a whole preamp, which is sort of built into the bass and takes maybe an hour to put in there, if you want to try a different preamp, you have to desolder that and then solder in a different one. And that's like a whole day of work, and most people don't even know how to do that.
Right.
So they're going to have to pay someone $100 to do that for them,
right.
or more, maybe in New York. I don't know what the going rate is here, but probably not cheap.
Right.
So the idea behind it was, I want a way that people can change their sound and experiment with different sounds and find the frequencies that really work best for their instrument without having to commit before they ever hear the instrument.
Right.
Because that's the reality of it. When you choose a preamp, usually you haven't even heard the instrument yet, or it hasn't been finished being built.
Exactly.
So how do you even know if that sound is what's gonna be optimal for that bass? So this is a way that somebody can install the harness, and then they have a line of different preamps they can choose from that all have their own sort of unique tonal characteristics, frequency centers, amounts of boost and cut, and whatnot. And if they don't like it, or if they just want to, try something new, they unscrew the control cavity, they unclip one, they clip another one in, and it's done.
All right, there are 2 different flavors of preamp. There's the red and the blue.
Yeah, 2 to start. I'm working on more, but I wanted to come out with 2 to begin with because I had 2 distinct ideas. The red is a little bit more modern. The treble sizzles a little bit more. The bass can be boosted a lot, but it's a fixed frequency, so it stays down low even when you're boosting a lot, which means you can get a really thick bass sound without it ever getting boomy. And it's a great general purpose preamp. It sounds great in for any context, but I think it does lean a little bit more modern sounding.
Right.
The blue preamp, it has the same mid-range frequencies, but the treble's a little lower, which means it'll sound great whether you have a tweeter in your cab or not. And if you're using flat wounds, the blue's a good choice because it's giving you more of that pick attack at the lower treble frequency. And then the bass control is a little bit higher, but the key difference with the bass is that it's a movable frequency, which means the more you boost or cut, the higher up it's going to affect those frequencies.
Okay.
So the bass ends up sounding a little bit rounder, a little bit bigger. It's almost more of the way like an old amp bass control would work, where it really kind of just gives you more general low end when you're boosting.
Right.
Not quite as much of a scalpel, but more of like just a nice big sort of fat bass control.
Now, what we like about the preamp here, New York Bass Works, Dave and I, is the fact that when we're speccing out a bass with a prospective client, it allows us, at the end of the process, to be able to further shape the sound of the overall instrument.
Right.
And I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean that's the OEM market is what I really wanted to target with this. I mean I'm happy to sell it to individual customers, and I love that people can buy it and retrofit it into their instruments.
Right.
But I think the really great thing about it is that an instrument maker can use it, and they might not necessarily know what preamp's going to work best with their instrument until it's done being built.
Right.
And so it's a way they can offer a service to their customer that lets them tweak the instrument after they've already been able to play it and figure out what they want.
And in a lot of ways, it's also like the player having the ability to upgrade his software of the instrument.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah.
And then not to mention the fact that if a preamp ever broke or if something
I
happened,
was getting to that.
yeah. You know, because I mean, I've designed this stuff to be pretty reliable.
Right.
I haven't had one fail, but theoretically, you know, things can break.
Things happen.
And if that happens in the field, you don't want to have to ship a whole instrument back and worry about insurance and the possibility of the
Right.
instrument getting damaged in transit, and then having to pay somebody to do all that work.
Right.
If something happens, you just plug a new one in. It's easy as that.
Yeah, we've had players on the road who have had a preamp go down, and it's panic stations at that
course.
point. A player can buy 2 of your preamps,
Yeah.
take them both on the road with him. God forbid something happens, he can do the repair himself
Sure.
on stage.
Sure. Yeah, they could do. It's a quick process, and so I'm really excited about it. I mean, I think people are going to respond well. They sound great. I mean, we worked so hard on the sound, as Dave knows, and it really was a collaboration to get it like just that last mile of you know. I liked the way the prototype sounded, but I'm so glad that Dave kept saying it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, it wasn't. I mean, it really wasn't good enough for me. It wasn't good enough for Dave, and it wouldn't have been the best out there. And so he pushed me through. He kept saying it just wasn't there yet. It wasn't there yet. And he's such a discerning guy that I knew that, you know, once he thought it was good enough to put in his instrument, I knew it was the best thing on the market.
Yeah. About 6, 7 preamps in, I thought he was nuts. I was like, you know, this has got to be as good as it gets.
Hey, so did I.
Yeah, but he stuck with it, and however many versions we went through, this latest version is absolutely you know where it's at, and it's remarkable.
I couldn't be prouder. I'm happy about the collaboration. I'm glad that it's going in what I would say is probably the best jazz bass I've ever played in my life.
You're referring to the reference series.
The reference series, yeah. I mean, I've known David for probably 5 years now, 5, 6 years, maybe longer. God, how long has it been? Probably 2009, 2010 is when I met you. So it's been a while. Yeah, and he had told me about that idea years ago for the reference series, and I had played his Cremona basses, all the handmade stuff, and so I knew what he could do, and I knew how good it could be if he could really nail a production instrument. But it was just such a challenge to get people that really sort of believed in that vision with him. And so I'm just happy to be sort of in that company where my product is good enough to go in the best bass that's on the market.
Well, speaking of the best basses on the market, you are an NYBW player yourself.
I am. I've got 3 of them now. Yeah.
Can you just run down real quick, you know, some of those instruments?
Sure. So my main one's the P bass. That was the first one that Dave built for me, and it's really simple. It's just alder, rosewood. It's got a Lawler pickup in it. It's all passive. I've got Tomastic flats on it. It's just for that old school kind of thumpy sound, and that's the sound that I've always sort of gravitated toward. It seems to work for me for everything. It works well with all my effects.
Right.
And it's just fun to play. I just like P basses. And that really, to me, is the perfect P bass. I've owned old vintage Fenders, pre-CBS stuff, and I've sold those all, and the Dave bass is the one I like. So that's what's stuck around through all these years. I had him build me a 4-string jazz bass, which is great too. It's got all sorts of little sort of weird features that only somebody like me might appreciate, but but it's great. I mean, it's just like the quintessential sort of alder rosewood jazz bass, kind of a hot jazz. It's got my preamp in it.
Right.
It was the test bed for my preamp, in fact. It's had one of my wiring harnesses in it for I think 3 years now, and so all the prototypes went through my jazz bass, and that's how I fine-tuned it. And then I recently took delivery of a Cremona. Finally, it was a lot of trials and tribulations involved, but it's great. It's unlike any other bass that I've ever seen him build.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Both in the looks and the shape and the playability of it. Everything is sort of different than what he's normally doing for his customers. But I had a really specific idea of what I wanted, and he was able
to.
And he was able to build that for me, and that's been great too. I'm still sort of learning it and getting back into playing a 5-string, which is something I haven't done in years. But I love the bass. I mean, it's just so exactly what I wanted, and I knew no one else would have been able to make that for me.
I played that bass before it shipped, and it was absolutely killer.
Yeah.
And what I like most about it is, you know, the back plate.
Mm-hmm.
If you
That's my favorite feature. It's
just
the
talk
one
about-
he really didn't want to do, but I got him to do it.
You want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, so part of the great thing about my preamp is that it can be swapped so quickly. So I wanted to facilitate that in my Cremona by having a magnetic control plate that had no screws, and you could just take off the control plate with a finger instantly. And turns out that's pretty hard to do. It's pretty hard to build one of those.
Yeah.
But David accepted the challenge, and it took a while to get it just right, but it works perfectly, and it lets me really demonstrate how easy it is to swap out the Shapeshifter preamps between the different models.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we'd like to thank you for coming in today.
Sure.
All the way from Seattle.
All the way from Seattle, and you know, I try to get into Dave's shop every time I'm in New York, and I think I pretty much have every time I've come. So it's always good to be here and see what he's got cooking, and it's great this time because he's been talking about these reference basses for so long now, and it's always just been, you know, just so far off. It's like next visit will be ready, next visit,
Right.
and now I'm here, and the basses are here, and now I want one myself.
Well, I happen to know where you can get one or two of them.
Is that right?
I know the guy. So,
All right.
Spencer Doren,
Yeah.
Pike Amplification. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Sure. Thank you.
You're very welcome.